Welcome back. And today, in how AI changes the CISSP without changing the CISSP, we're going to talk about domain 5, identity and access management. This domain is all about who gets access to what. It covers identification, authentication, authorization, accountability, or the IAAA model. It covers concepts like least privilege, giving people the least amount of privileges they need. Even if someone is the CEO, that doesn't mean that they need to have a privileged account. They need admin rights. It covers need to know, who has access to what data, which is very different from least privilege. Least privilege is about the actual privileges. Need to know is about the data, the clearance, the confidentiality. It covers things like mandatory vacation, separation of duties, dual control, and other concepts. We talk about access control models here. When we usually talk about identity and access management, we talk about employees, vendors, systems, users. But today with AI, we need to have data control over who has access to the data, the APIs, the systems, the workflow. AI accesses all of it. And the more agents we use, the more models we use, the bigger the problem. CISSP points out that today, identity and access management is not just about users, it's about systems too. And in the case of AI, we're talking about non-human identities. We're talking about AI agents. We're talking about least privilege, making sure that these agents don't have additional privileges beyond what they need. We're talking about need to know, and that is a huge problem when it comes to AI, because most models were not created with need to know in mind. That means that an agent will have access to everything. Now, let's say the CEO of the company and a data analyst ask the AI model the same question. They might be exposed to the same answer or similar answer because it's based on the same data. However, while the CEO is privy to everything that goes on in the company, including confidential transaction and things like that, the analyst is not supposed to know that. The meaning is not because we don't trust the analyst, because sometimes that analyst might not understand the implication of sharing that data with someone else. That could lead to early disclosure. It could be illegal, that's first, but it could also have potential financial repercussions on the company. We know that AI is not all bad. It can really help us, especially in this domain. For example, if we use AI to analyze user behavior, we can find patterns that are abnormal. We can find impossible travel time. We can find strange behavior. We can find unusual timing, things that in the past used to go all to the SOC analyst trying to understand whether or not it's legitimate or not. AI can now review that data and give us a lot of insights as to what is legitimate work and what is not. AI has broad permissions across multiple systems, and nobody really reviews it normally. So in domain 5 thinking, we're thinking about provisioning, deprovisioning, we're thinking about the lack of least privilege, the lack of need to know, and we have to think about poor identity governance and how we're going to maintain it with AI systems. Now let's take a real-world scenario. I already mentioned that need to know is a big issue when it comes to AI. Now let's think about a company that deploys an AI assistant. This AI assistant has access to file shares, knowledge bases, ticketing systems. It participates in meetings and takes notes and turns them into tickets and everything else. It means that the employee will work so much faster, so much more efficiently. But if nobody clearly defined the guardrails, what the assistant should and should not access, this AI assistant will suddenly have multiple permissions across the organization, not necessarily appropriate to the employee that uses that system. That is a huge problem because suddenly people will have data that they're not supposed to be privy to. They don't understand the repercussion of sharing that data. They don't have visibility, especially when we're talking about low-level and mid-level employees that don't understand the grand context. So we have to be very specific of what we let those AI agents do, those AI assistants do. And that is something that unfortunately was not baked into most of these systems. Now let's understand how it can play out in the exam. An organization deploys an AI-powered internal assistant with broad access to file shares, ticketing system, HR records, and financial data. An attacker compromises the assistant's credential. Which identity and access management principle would have most reduced the potential damage? The answer here is, of course, list privilege. This is a classic attacker point of view question. The problem is not just that the assistant was compromised. The real problem is that once this assistant was compromised, it has way too much access. So if the AI assistant has been limited to the minimal amount of permissions that it actually needed to perform its duties, that's fine. But if that principle has not been kept, someone who jeopardizes the system can have access to a lot more than is actually needed. Like in most domains, AI in domain 5 is both an advantage and a disadvantage. We have to understand the way we can use it to increase productivity, to identify wrongdoings, to identify suspicious behavior of both humans and systems. But we need to remember that if it's not configured correctly, the AI tools themselves can pose a huge threat. In the next session, we're going to talk about domain 6. We're already over halfway there, so don't forget to subscribe so you get all the notifications on all the next videos. And if you want even more CISSP related content, you want to participate in masterclasses and review sample questions, join Cybermania. It's completely free. The link is here below.